Luke 38 through 42. Now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her."
My name is Abbie Brinkhorst, and I am a senior at Parkway South High School. And I would just like to say welcome to All Student Sunday. I know this is one of my favorite Sundays of the year, so you get to enjoy it. Yay. I'd like to start out by giving some background information on our scripture verse today. Today's verses came from the 10th chapter of Luke when Jesus was traveling around teaching, and this was a night that he was planning on staying with Lazarus and Lazarus' two sisters, Mary and Martha. So all throughout the day, Lazarus' sisters were in a hurry to prepare the house for Jesus and to get it ready to accept him. This is kind of like when my mom makes us clean the house for Thanksgiving and Christmas because she wants it to be great from all the way to the floors to the top of the ceiling where it has to spotless. But this is where the difference from Mary and Martha came. Martha was the one that was worried about the details, and she wanted everything to be perfect, and she kept working. And when Jesus came, she was still working on cleaning the house because she wanted to make the good impression of Jesus. She wanted to be the socially acceptable part of the two. And then Mary was the one that was working until Jesus got there, and then when Jesus got there, she put everything down and she went to Jesus and she wanted to learn from him, and she sat and listened to his teachings, which was really a big deal back then because women really weren't told to do that. It was more the men that would follow that. But Mary wanted to grow in her faith and follow Jesus. And so long story short, Martha got really mad that Mary didn't do as much work as she did, and still Jesus accepted Mary more kind of because she came to him. And so Jesus tells her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." So I was thinking about this, and I was trying to figure out how this related to our school. And so I thought about it this way. Our school is like the house that's being prepared. So I think a better question to ask is, who are the Marthas and the Marys present in our school? One could argue that one group of people is Martha because they worry about the details of their lives, like are they wearing the right clothes, do they have the right shoes, the right friends, the right grades? The other group would be Marys because they're the open-minded learners and are okay with being who they are. They're the people looking out for the other people and looking for new opportunities to learn and grow. Personally, I don't really agree with either of those statements. Instead, I like to believe that each and every one of us has a little bit of both Mary and Martha in our lives to create a good balance. In essence, where are your priorities at a specific moment in time? If you're focusing your mind on the details of everything around you without stopping and listening to what God is calling you to do, then you're having a Martha moment. If you're putting forth the effort into making things happen for the bigger purpose without focusing too much on the details, you know you're doing it to honor Jesus Christ. You're having a Mary moment. This past spring, I had my first big Mary and Martha moment because I was one of the youth leaders for the 30-hour famine, and I worked with a few adults to create this event for our youth group. This famine wasn't until February, but we began planning it in October because it was a lot to handle and we needed to get everything done. Now, if you know me, you probably know that I tend to do things in a very particular way, trying to pay very close attention to detail and fit every detail in I possibly can. But with this 30-hour famine, I tried to do that even more because it was the first time that we were doing it again in 3 years for our youth group, and I really wanted it to be perfect. It wasn't until I began raising money in January when I got asked why I was collecting money by one of my teachers that I realized I was being sucked in by all the details. I wasn't focusing on the bigger picture. I was so worried about cutting out paper bag people and getting people to participate that I didn't realize I was missing the reason of why in all of my actions. Why was I wanting to get kids to participate? Why was I cutting out these people so that our congregation could see how many children we've changed lives? It was then that I went around not asking the youth to come because it was a fun learning experience with friends, but instead it was because they could make a difference for people all across the world and in our St. Louis area. With this change in outlook, I saw how the students reacted to my invitation differently. They seemed more excited and willing to participate, knowing that they had the opportunity to make the difference in the lives of others. I will always remember the way the students were more excited when the event was focused on helping people change lives instead of focusing inward on themselves. I believe this progression was when. I believe this progression I went through with 30-hour famine is something that people my age go through all the time at school. This past fall, I was blessed to be the drum major of our marching band, and throughout the season, I saw this switch from Martha to Mary in our new marchers. In the beginning, these students were focused inward and just nervous about being the new kid, that they didn't really grasp the big picture of being a part of the big band family and trying to achieve that common goal of success. They were too focused on stepping off with the right foot, breathing in time, or simply avoiding getting hit by the big tuba player coming straight at them. It was a very rewarding experience to see how the older students, who had already gone through a few years of band, took the younger marchers and showed them the ropes. The closer we all became throughout the season, the more Marys I began to see in all of them. Students these days are faced with many stresses: getting good grades, getting into college, playing on the varsity team, or being the best musician. However, even though there are all these pressures, the faith has to be the top priority that you work at if you truly mean you want to be a Christian. That's the big picture for me. I feel truly blessed by having this church family as a base. It's amazing to me how much everyone cares that we do well and grow in our faith. By allowing our youth group to do trips such as Spirit Camp, mission trips, and retreats, it allows us to find the Mary in ourselves. The thing I love about these trips is the progression through the youth group that you get to go through. You start off as a 6th grader, seeing all the big kids, and you're looking up to them to see what type of role model that they are for you. Then, sooner than you know it, you're the big kid that everybody looks up to for advice, and you have to start answering the questions. But this system never changes. Every trip you take has just as much impact as the last, because you're constantly growing in your faith. For example, this past Friday, we went on a retreat where we talked about how our faith is not just a one-time commitment and then you're done. No, it's something you have to constantly work at and improve. And yes, there will be times when you need to focus on the details of life, and you can't lose the bigger picture. Life is full of Martha moments, but you have to take the time to grow in your faith, just as Mary did by going and learning from Jesus. Thank you.
John 11:17-27. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world.
Good morning. My name is Mason Smith, and I'm a freshman at Marquette High School. Going into high school can terrify a lot of kids. Suddenly everything we do matters. People care about our grades and our test scores. Years later, people will ask you, what classes did you take in high school? And they'll care about the answer. And this sudden drop of reality that every little decision you make can have a huge impact on the rest of your life, that can be really scary for a lot of kids. I was not one of those kids. I was pumped for high school. I was going to take the class by storm. Perfect grades, lots of extracurriculars, great friends. It's going to be amazing. And that first week of high school, I was over the moon. I was taking great notes. All my homework was done. I was organized. It was awesome. Then that second or third Monday of the year rolls around, and I hit the realization, I have to do this every day for 4 years. The same repetitive thing every day for 4 years. And it seems like just about everyone in the school realizes this at exactly the same time. And that's when you see kids sort of regress into what I would call the stereotypical American high schooler, dragging themselves across the threshold of the school each day and laboring tirelessly until they can mercifully come home and catch a few hours of sleep before they have to do their homework and do it all again the next day. And you do that day after day until those 2 days of solace each week when you can hang out with your friends and actually do something you enjoy for a change. So it's this overwhelming sense of monotony that makes freshman year so impactful for a lot of kids. It's when you see people turn into things that you never imagined they could be. Suddenly, kids that you went to kindergarten with are sneaking alcohol past their parents and getting high on the weekends. So it's tough to look around and wonder, what would Jesus think if he came to my school? It was easy for me to think it probably wouldn't be very good. Maybe half the kids in the school wouldn't give him the time of day. And of the half that would, probably half of those would just want to yell at him for the D they got on their history test the day before. And when you finally get down to the kids who would actually be so thankful that he would grace them with their presence, you'd have your Marthas and your Marys. Your Marthas might be too concerned about showing off their spiritual repertoire. Hey, Jesus, look at all these amazing things I've done for you, that they would miss out on the message he was trying to give. While your Marys would be hanging so strongly on every word that they would forget to go out and put it into practice in the world. So thinking about all this, it was easy to get pretty negative. Then I look at the scripture for today. The same Martha, who had been too busy cleaning to listen to what Jesus had to say, runs out to him just 4 days after the death of her brother Lazarus. And at first she's very doubtful. She says, Lord, if you had been here earlier, my brother would still be alive. And he says to her, I am the life and the resurrection. All those who believe in me will live even in death. Do you believe this? She says, Yes, Master. I believe you are the Lord and the Messiah who comes to us. And thinking about this, I think about all the kids who I would picture as Marthas in my school. And it makes me remember that these are still the kids who have dedicated their life to Christ and are living through him. And those are the kind of kids who are going to try and shape their life to be as Christ-like as possible, who are going to be learning and growing and are going to be able to figure out how to maintain those details while still grabbing onto that big picture and going out into the world. And the same goes for the Marys. Maybe right now they've kind of shut themselves in and they're just listening to the big picture while not actually going out and doing anything about it. But they're going to figure that out. When they're listening to the words Jesus has to say to them, they're going to realize that they have to take it out and share it with the world and make a difference. Because that's the important thing. You have to remember that we're all high schoolers. We've got the rest of our life to figure it out. And if we've already dedicated our life to Christ, that's the rest of our life that we're going to be learning how to do amazing things for him. So the real difficult part of the question is, what about all the kids who haven't given their life to Christ? Because, this story is Mary and Martha, but I think more accurately it should be perhaps Mary and Martha and, say, Elizabeth. Maybe Martha's too busy cleaning, and Mary's too busy listening, and Elizabeth's too busy walking down the road in the other direction. Because the reality is, not every kid knows Jesus. Not every kid understands that devoting yourself to Jesus is even an option. But the important thing to remember about these kids is they're still trying to be the best people they possibly can. It's human nature to create the best possible version of ourselves. Even if they're not doing it for what we would consider the correct reason as service of Jesus, they're still trying to improve themselves every day. They're still growing and learning. So looking around at all these kids, it's easy to start seeing Jesus everywhere, pulling at the little heartstrings that convince us to do good things. I have a Spanish class this year, and some of the kids in this Spanish class I wouldn't exactly consider to be the most Christian kids or even the most morally correct kids. We have another student in that Spanish class who's different from the rest of us. He has a physical handicap. He has to go everywhere in a wheelchair. You know, obviously that's not exactly the kid who's going to get all the attention or get picked first for every class project. But every day, as he's leaving the class, without fail, 2 or 3 of the kids will look at him, and they'll smile, and they'll say, "Have a good day." And I like to think that makes his day just a little bit better. And it's these random acts of kindness that give me tremendous hope, because I believe that every act of kindness is an act of Christ. And it's important to remember that everyone, everywhere, no matter who they are, what they've done, is on a faith journey with Christ, because Christ is always knocking on the door, whether or not you choose to answer it yet. And each of these little acts of kindnesses are a step forward on that journey. So I got to thinking, maybe high school isn't the place where religion goes to die. Maybe high school is the place where religion goes to be tested and to grow and develop into this beautiful thing, this beautiful faith. And even for those kids that won't walk out of those doors 4 years from now thinking Jesus is the most important thing in my life, they're still learning what morality is and what it means to be a good person. And that's really what this faith is all about in the end. So the question isn't really, what would Jesus see if he came to my school? It's, what does he see? Because he's already here. He's in the hearts of every Martha and every Mary, and he's walking a step behind every student who hasn't heard the call yet. Jesus is already here, and he sees a lot of sin, and he sees a lot of non-believers. He sees a lot of Marthas, and he sees a lot of Marys. But he also sees into our hearts, and he sees his children who are growing and learning and trying. When Jesus takes his first step into my school each morning, he looks around and he smiles. Thank you.